a never-ending journey. It's not that you sit in a room, decide what your values are, and then you don't think about it. Then the culture will fail.
This is Melanie.
And this is Christian.
You're listening to Follow the Gradient, the weekly podcast with actionable insights about how to build a business while staying sane.
Welcome back to another episode of our Follow the Gradient podcast. In one of our previous episodes, we heard our guest Stanislav talk about the importance of leadership in building high-performing teams. There is an overarching component to leadership and team building, and that is culture. Culture is something very intangible, and for many of us, it is hard to pinpoint specific action points to build and foster cultures. Although many of us know it is at the heart of every company and team. Many successful companies have distinct and sometimes controversial cultures. Let this be Facebook and its move fast and break things spirit, or Netflix's mantra to trust people, not policies.
Today, we have the pleasure of welcoming Noa Perry-Reifer, Chief People Officer of On, the athletic sportswear brand that you might all know. On was founded in January 2010 in Switzerland, and it has quickly developed from a small startup to a global sportswear brand. Their trajectory has been steep and even includes an IPO in 2021. They're selling products across more than 50 countries and partner with the likes of Roger Federer or Zendaya. Today, On is bringing a revenue of over $1 billion and has been named one of Newsweek's top 100 global most loved workplaces. And especially this last point is what we want to focus on today in our chat with Noa. Because we were wondering, how do you keep and nurture an entrepreneurial culture throughout the startup journey from a team of 3 founders to thousands of employees across different continents and time zones? What are frameworks that work? Where do you start? And how do you evolve? And what are the pitfalls when going on to this journey?
Noa is an experienced human resources professional with a demonstrated history of working in both growing and established companies such as Goldman Sachs and Marvel. She joined On in September 2017 as their Chief People Officer when there were roughly 100 people. Today, the firm has over 3,000 employees of more than 90 nationalities.
So without further ado, let's dive in. So Noa, welcome to our show. Very happy to have you here. As we've learned during the intro, On has been growing from 100 when you joined in 2017 up to around 3,000 people today. So I would be very curious to hear what were some key milestones in On's growth story where you could really feel you're working in a hypergrowth environment.
Yeah, thanks. I'm very happy to be here. I think the interesting thing about hypergrowth is that it's not one milestone or 2 milestones. Every day feels like a milestone because when you come to work every day, you learn something new, something changes, you need to be adaptive. And throughout these 7 years, I really learned that this is what makes this environment so unique and so special. So from hiring the first person when we were only 100 people into my team, or then extending into other countries, entering China for the first time as an example, to going public in New York Stock Exchange, to moving to an office that is not only 1 floor, but actually a tower, to open the first retail store in a key location in New York, or afterwards in London on Regent Street. All of these things have been milestones. Most recently, seeing more than 60 athletes in the Olympics compete in On product. So all of these moments are amazing milestones. But the truth is that the hypergrowth characteristic is that you come to the office every day, and every day you have at least 1 milestone and 1 failure, by the way.
I can totally put my signature to that. Yes,
Definitely. And I mean, speaking of failures, right? Many startups and scale-ups fail because they cannot keep up with that speed, which you just described. and they lose important talents. At On, you seem to have managed that quite well, also thanks to that entrepreneurial spirit. So how would you describe that spirit?
Yeah, so On has five spirits that basically are the values that we aspire to have in everything that we do. And I think one of the most important things to understand is it is not necessarily actually the values themselves or the spirits themselves. It's more how do we use and embrace these spirits. And what is extremely important is that everything that we do at On doesn't start with the what. It's never what are we going to do, but it is always why are we doing it and how are we going to do that. And these two elements have to include, first of all, the mission that we have as a company. So why are we all here? And then how are we doing it, which is the behaviors and the spirits that we want to embody when we work on the elements that we work on. And that ensures that the five spirits are very relevant and you almost lead with them versus with anything else that comes before. And in terms of the entrepreneurship, there is a spirit that we call the explorer spirit. And this is really the spirit that brings together all the elements that you need to have to ensure that you continue to explore and you continue to innovate as the company grows. So elements that we highlight there are the need to challenge the status quo, the ability to make decisions and taking risks despite not knowing everything, because in a fast-paced environment, and I'm sure you can relate to it, there are so many unknowns, but you still need to take the risk. You still need to make decisions. And how do you do that as you grow is something that we're very passionate about. At the same time, we need to build a culture that really embraces failure and embraces mistakes. Because if people are fearful of making a mistake, then they will never challenge the status quo. If people are fearful of failing, they will never innovate. So these two have to go hand in hand. Otherwise, the entrepreneurship or the ability to challenge the status quo will stop or will become very, very loose. So this is something that we really invest in. And I would say that the leadership is just so important to enable that. And it starts from who do you hire, to how do you enable leaders to act? What are the spirits that you behave based on? So it's really everything, but the most important is to start with that versus to finish with that.
Looking back at the journey of On, when did you guys first come up with these kinds of components, let's say?
Yeah, that's great. A great question. So we're very lucky to have some parts of the spirits very early on as part of the DNA. When I joined, I think it was around 2017, we took the values and we reshaped them into what now we call the spirits. But many of these spirits, or I would say 4 out of 5 of these spirits, were already in a certain format from the very, very early days. So this culture first approach and this people first approach has always been part of On since the very beginning. What is also very important, and this is something that we talk quite a lot about at On, is that we want to preserve the culture, we want to preserve the spirits, but we also need to adapt the culture. And if we don't adapt it, then the culture will become too weak. And then a new culture or new cultures will start trickling in the organization. So it is necessary to ask ourselves every year on how should the culture adapt so it is still relevant and strong to what we're trying to achieve. And this is not by changing the spirits. This is by thinking how are these spirits need to come together or need to show up in meaningful behaviors based on where the company is. And if I try to give an example, maybe the best one is that On started more from a wholesale B2B environment. Then we moved more to the e-com environment. And only recently in the last years, we started to expand our own retail stores, which means that having people in retail stores that are in our team was completely new. And this is a completely new workforce that we had to engage with. And how are these spirits going to translate into a person that works in shifts in a store somewhere in Shanghai is something that is completely different. And we always had to think, and we're still thinking, because it's a never ending journey on what are the adaptations that we need to create and at the same time stay true to our values and spirits. So it's a never ending journey. It's not that you sit in a room, decide what your values are, and then you don't think about it. Then the culture will fail.
Absolutely. And maybe for all the listeners that who might be at exact the same point that you have been when you actually started in 2017, let's maybe also talk about the hands-on aspects. I mean, you already hinted it a bit, but how did you create this foundation? Who was involved? Did you do it in-house or hire someone who helped you? So basically, how did you go about it in a practical sense? Also, what you were just mentioning is that you adapt the culture in order to keep it.
So I think we did all of it ourselves in-house. I think that, and this is probably all the different leaders that are listening now, it only works if this is done by everyone in the leadership team. So if I was the only one that would come every day and say, we need to think about our culture, we need to think about our spirits, I would become really annoying and we would also not be able to move the needle. So I think the biggest takeaway is that it has to be a team effort and it has to be something that everyone very eagerly in a very passionate way works on it together. There is a saying that we always say as part of our spirits, because we have a spirit that is called team spirit. And we say we start and finish as a team. And it is, of course, taken from a sports context. But at the end, everything that we do really needs to come from a team. So I am very grateful for the collaboration on all aspects of culture and people that I have with the two co-CEOs that we have, right? So it's something that we very eagerly push together, and I never need to push them. I push them, they push me, and that's how we make this place a better place.
And so, like when we talk about the practical setup of it, so basically the founders and the co-CEOs were in the room with you in a sense, but then you also involved the employees, or how did you go about that? And did you also face challenges then?
Yeah, I think in terms of the spirits, there was a small group of people who really crafted that, and I think what is important is not only how you craft that and make these spirits the spirits, but how do you embed them in the organization? And this is where we spent and still a lot of time on. A lot of companies come with the spirits and then they put it on their intranet, or they have every room in the office named by one of the spirits, right? And this actually doesn't change behavior. What changed behavior is to go a step deeper. So in a practical term, what we do quite a lot, we did, but still doing, is we rely a lot on storytelling. So when we announced our spirits for the first time, as an example, and back then we were way smaller, so we could fit the entire company into one room, what we did is, and it would sound maybe strange, but we only shared stories. So we had different people from around the organization standing up in a big stage and share stories about how the explorer spirit came to life maybe 5 years ago, or how the team spirit was something that made them join on. And this is something that we still do. Another example is that we have quite a lot of people that join us every month. So I think recently it's been 100 people per month that join on. And how do you ensure that 100 people every month still feel these spirits, and not only feel them, but they then need to go and be the culture carriers of these spirits. So in the onboarding, the founders and the co-CEOs are still very much involved. So this is not a job that is handed over. It's something that we continue to bring, and we continue to bring from the very top.
Mm-hmm. And did you also face challenges or resistance? And how did you go about them?
We always face certain challenges, resistance. I would say the people that we hire in the team continues to challenge us. And I think it's good. I think it's good because we as human beings make mistakes, and we as human beings have to be challenged in order to get to a better place. So it can be a challenge on, hey, we're doing something and we don't really feel this is according to our spirits, or we feel that if we don't do these type of things, then this spirit will how are we thinking about adapting this part of our culture to ensure that we are still embracing the other components. So there are always conversations about that. And I think it's also important to test different things, to try different things, to not be afraid of moving into different directions. And when it doesn't work, to also say loud and clear, this doesn't work. So we do an engagement survey every year. I think many companies do that. It's kind of a long survey where we question a lot of different things about our culture and how people feel. And we learn quite a lot of things about that. And we learn a lot of things about, hey, we need to change that. And we're not always able to change everything, but we take that very, very seriously as a call to action. And as feedback that we need to take and work on.
When you, and I think you described it very visual earlier, right? The company has like different stages, and you used to fit with the entire company into one room, and now it's like a global company. So when the company goes through different stages, when did you feel, at what stage was it most challenging to keep that entrepreneurial spirit? And when was it also maybe most crucial to kind of have that spirit and to continue living it?
Yeah. So we're still growing. So I'm still in the mindset of it continues to be the most challenging, like today, and tomorrow it will be even more challenging. So I don't know if there is like a point where it is the most challenging, but maybe I can refer to two things. The first is, I think when companies are kind of, and this also research says it, so it's not me, but like there is that tipping point of 1,000 people, and that 1,000 people mark is it, something becomes different from even the ability to grasp the different parts of the organization. So when you're 100 or 200 people, you kind of know everyone, right? When you're 1,000 people, you probably know maybe over a half, or still a good understanding of the different components of the organization. And afterwards, it becomes even bigger, and it starts to be harder. So that's one tipping point. And then the other tipping point is probably when On went public. There was a lot of fear there, like what will happen, right, as we go public, and what will change, and On will not be the same anymore, because there will be, at the end, a public company needs to do things that we haven't done before. And again, did not compromise on the mindset of starting with the why and starting with the how. And everything can be done in many, many different ways. So as long as we think about the how, when we do the what, which could be reporting or things that you need to do in a public environment, and be very, very intentional about that. So when we went public and we stood in the New York Stock Exchange, what we did with the teams that were not there in New York and how much time we invested in ensuring that everyone feels like they're standing on that stage. And we continue to think about these things, and it's hard. It's hard. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of energy, sometimes a lot of emotions, but we don't give up on it.
What I often hear from startups that have turned into scale ups that have then IPOs, and that there is at one point like this feeling of, oh God, we are so at the risk of getting super bureaucratic. I never signed up for working for big corp. I signed up to work for a startup. Did you ever have that? And if yes, how did you act?
Yeah. So first of all, things do change. I sometimes walk and I know, Melody, you at least were in the on offices. I used to walk and know everyone. And sometimes I come back from vacation and I come to the floor. It's like, hey, as a leader, I need to go and say hello to people. So I go inside and I was like, oh, I actually don't know anyone in this floor. Right. So I have these moments of, oh, it is changing. So that's a reality. And I think it's important to be aware of that. At the same time, I would say that as you grow and start up to scale up to corporate or to however you want to call it, it is extremely important to invest more into the things that will prevent you from being what you don't want to be. So again, giving an example, expenses, right? So we used to have the leader approve expenses, and we were growing into 1,000 people, going towards an IPO. And I remember that day we stood a management team and we say, hey, we want to ensure that a culture of autonomy and responsibility and trust remains. So how can we make it even stronger? And we took the manager approval from all expenses at On. And this is a bit counterintuitive because most companies will not have the approval, and then they become bigger and they start having the approval, right?
Yeah.
And we did the opposite. We did the same with vacation. We had vacation that had to be approved. There were set times of vacation. And now we have the flexible vacation, which, you take vacation when you feel it's right. We trust you and we know that you will do it in the best way for you and for your team and for On. So we kind of over-indexed on some stuff to ensure that we still change because that's the reality, but we don't give up on the things that are the core of what we believe in.
What was the feedback from within the organization when you push that sort of autonomy?
People are, of course, in general, very supportive of that and very grateful for that. I think that in general, this is not for everybody. And this connects a little bit more towards recruiting efforts, if you think, because there are sometimes amazing people that we meet. Sometimes we even hire them and it is not for them, right? They feel that they would be better placed in a company that maybe has more process or is slightly less chaotic, or there are a little bit more knows versus unknowns. So I think in general, the feedback is, of course, very, very positive, but also it is fair to say that it is not for everybody, right? And also when you implement something like flexible vacation, right? And we know a lot of big companies have that, and the feedback is not good, right? The feedback is, I used to have 20 days and I took the 20 days. Now I have unlimited, but I don't take it, because if I take it, it's not something that is viewed in a positive way. So it's not only by that announcement, but it's also by how you live that. And again, I remember when I joined and I saw the founders or the CEOs or my peers really taking time off, putting that out of office in the email and not responding, right? Like, oh, that's refreshing, right? So how can you really lead through that and enable that, not only by announcing this new initiative, but really following through? And then when teams see that we follow through, and of course we check that, we use data all the time. We check that. We see where are the gaps? Where are teams that maybe don't take enough vacation? Or where are the areas that we need to push people more towards healthier work habits? So we of course monitor that to ensure that this still works for us. And as I said about adaptation or adapting the culture, the minute that we see that this is something that doesn't work anymore, then we need to change course and we need to try different things.
Yeah, and I think it's really like leading by example, and really like leading, like the leader needs to show it each and every day. It's like with children, you can say stuff, but if you do something else, like it doesn't serve anyone. So I'm 100% convinced that this is the way to go. Also on this topic about the spirits and just also the culture, like On recently launched the Cloud Book Strike LS, like a spray-on sneaker created in a single step using an automatic robotic arm. The New York Times called it the craziest sneaker you have ever seen. How do you also, in this spirit, empower employees to take initiative and drive innovation? Has this also to do with your approach to autonomy, or how do you go about it?
Yeah, I think it's a really great example. And when you share it, I almost have goosebumps, because it's really a great example to how that spirit works. Because this idea wasn't even an idea of that big leader, or it was simply a team member that we've hired because he had that great idea. And we said, hey, cool, let's try that, right? And we gave the resource, we gave everything that we can. And from an idea, it became a reality that, again, I've been to the Olympics and you could see the robot working every day to make this product happen. Now it's only the start, and now we hope to make something even bigger out of it. But it's exactly that spirit, the explorer spirit and the team spirit and the athlete, like it all came together because we allowed for that person and then that team to explore.
If you now imagine an employee starting to work at On and that person is going to stay there for 6 years, how does that employee experience your initiatives? So really from the point of view of that employee, and what are the kind of tangible ways where I can see that in the onboarding process, maybe from day one onwards, and then later on in my career?
Yeah, so I think if a person starts it On now, the first thing is my expectation is that they would see it as our initiatives. So they would very much be part of shaping and crafting these initiatives. You don't need to be in my team, or you don't need to be me, or you don't need to be in the management team to craft some of these initiatives. So I think, again, a good practical example is everything that we do on the diversity and inclusion front. Like we have inclusion groups where people really craft our agenda and our strategy behind that. So I think that's the first thing. I would really hope for every person that joins On to understand that this is a responsibility that each of us has, no matter in what team or what level they are in. And I think the second thing that I feel people are going to feel is that it is a journey with a lot of chapters And every chapter is going to be different and feel different. And the way that every person will contribute to these chapters is by crafting them, versus whether it's a chapter about our culture, or a chapter about our product, or a chapter about our marketing, or a chapter about our finance. It doesn't really matter, but there is a very strong opportunity and invitation, but also an expectation to help us craft these chapters. And that will be only possible if we continue to give people that autonomy, if we continue to enable people, to empower people, if we continue to give people different and diverse opportunities within On in you said 6 years. So how can a person do more than one role in 6 years? How can a person move maybe countries, continents, functions, learn, explore, grow? All of these things need to happen for people to really help us craft these chapters. So maybe we can give the headlines, but we cannot write the chapters.
So insightful and also exciting for future employees.
Yeah.
Now, shifting gears a little bit, how important is the CEO's personality and behavior in influencing this culture, so to say, like in one or the other direction? And where does the CEO have the greatest lever to also promote the culture within a company?
Super important, extremely important. I think we have two CEOs, which is already pretty unique. Each of them brings different perspectives, different approaches. I think that the way that the CEOs lead a company and the emphasis that they put on people and on culture is something that is extremely important for all of this to be successful. And I think we talked about it a bit earlier, that if I'm going to be the only person that talks about it, then it will never work. And we have once a year an event that we call Global Meeting, where everyone in the company spends a few days in the region. We mainly focus on the new product. We bring the new product. We talk about the marketing. We talk about the business. And we had it this year, and the two CEOs opened and had like the first, I think it was an hour and a half, where they opened this event. And most CEOs would probably talk about our business and how well or not well we're doing, or at least our product. But this entire 1.5 hours was about culture. Nothing else. Not a single number, not a single product. It was only about the people that were sitting in a room. And I think that's a good example to share how key they are. They're my partners in crime, together with many other leaders at On, for this amazing thing.
What are things that you wish you had known and would do now differently?
I'm sure there are a lot of things that I should have done differently. So I think in a setup or in a company that moves very, very, very fast, like On, there is a need, or there is that feeling that you need to do a lot of things, and a lot of the things you need to do very fast. And I learned over the years that sometimes it is okay to pause, to think, to take the necessary time before jumping into the decision or already making your, exact thoughts. I even remember one of the CEOs once told me, "Hey, Noah, before we talk about this, let's take 24 hours to think." And I remember I have that in my mind, that sometimes like, okay, that happened, but I'm going to sleep on it, right? I'm going to sleep on it, and then I will wake up, and then I will speak again. So I think I don't think it's a one thing that I would do differently, but I think it is an element that not only helped me to probably be a better leader at On, but it also helped me from a personal perspective to sometimes release the pressure of of acting very, very fast. And I think that's something that I'm still learning, still trying to do better. But definitely a good learning for me when you work in these very fast-paced environments.
And on this point, because our listeners are themselves founders and startup operators and just entrepreneurial minds and spirits that really want to dive into the world of startup and how to improve themselves and being in a fast-paced environment, what, except what you just said, which I think is already super valuable, and what else concretely are things that you personally do to keep your personal inner entrepreneurial spirit alive, but also keep it alive in a healthy manner, so to say, or in a sustainable manner?
Yeah, of course. I think, hey, there are many things. I feel that entrepreneurs are people who join different businesses, build different, there is a reason why they did that, right? Because they really believed in the product, or they really believed in the team, or they were very passionate about the mission, many different reasons. I think one of the things that is just extremely important is to stay very true to your passion, to your values, to the why that made you join the company or found the company or take on this role. So what is the mission? What is the value? What are the values makes you wake up in the morning every day with a smile, and know that it is not going to be 100% of what you're going to do, but it has to be a core component of what you're going to do. And for me, it's people in leadership. And I wake up in the morning and ask myself that every morning, or maybe not every morning, but I do, to ensure that I stay true to what's important for me. And I think the second thing that I mentioned already about how you kind of wait until you act, and a lot of people call it, the work-life balance, or like they're all of these things. What I learned is that companies can have a lot of initiatives, right? They can try and support well-being. They can try to provide trainings, and we do all of that. And I think it's important. However, the only person that can really help is you. So I can help myself, and it is not the company's responsibility to change these things. So I think understanding that really, really well, and understanding that I own it, is something that is extremely important. And we all have different habits or different things that can help us, whether it's sometimes shorter days, or sometimes it doesn't matter. But understanding that nothing external will solve it. So, right, like I always get it from people, I only need to hire that person, and then my life will be so much better. And guess what? This person is hired plus 10 more, and it is the same, right? So it can only come from ourselves. And I truly believe that. And I feel that the minute a person really understands that, then it's like a very, very, very big unlock that then brings boundaries or habits that make people feel better. I just told you that I did sports this morning, right? So I do that every day, no matter what happens. I would do that because I know that then I can be a better Noah for On, or for my children, or anyone.
I think these are some perfect final words, and I think we should do a follow-up episode on how inner peace and staying sane while you kind of build the plane, and it's still in the air, how you pull that off. Maybe just two final questions at last. Where can our audience find out more about the culture at On and all the different spirits you just talked about, and where can they find you?
Where they can find me. They can find me at On, or at the playground, or at pickup from school. They can find me there. They can find a lot more about On our website. So we have a pretty robust career page where we talk quite a lot about our culture, the people behind the culture. I can give an example of we were very active in the Olympics. So not only we talked about our athletes, but we created a big kind of feed on the people behind the Olympics, which is our team that worked on it for the last 4 years. So there is a lot that people can just learn and explore by looking at that. And of course I'm on, I don't know if I should say it or not, but I'm on LinkedIn. I'll try to answer all of your questions. But again, I'm very happy to come here again and to share more perspectives and to learn from both of you as well.
Thank you so much, Noa. It was so insightful. We had a lot of fun talking to you, and I'm already looking forward to the follow-up edition. But until then, have a really nice time, and thanks for being on the show with us.
Thank you so much. It was a great pleasure and also very fun from my side.
This was another episode of Follow the Gradient.
And now we would love to hear from you. How did you like it? What should we improve? Do you have any suggestions, ideas, or dream podcast guests? Please let us know.
Thank you and see you again next week.